Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Millie Garcia Serrano, and I serve as Regional Director of the Southeast Regional Office with MassDEP in the Southeast region, Lakeville, Mass. MassDEP is also known as the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And we're here tonight at UMass Dartmouth for a public session. This is a public informational session that we will be holding. This session is being recorded and will be conducted in a hybrid format, meaning there are people participating both in person and remotely. The recording will be posted on MassDEP's website. Some Spanish, Portuguese, and Cape Verdean translation services will be available for MassDEP staff and other assistants if needed. Those persons assisting with interpretive assistance will now introduce themselves and ask if any interpretation services will be needed. So I will start. Buenas tardes, soy Milly García Serrano, directora regional en MassDEP. Si hay alguien presente que necesite asistencia interpretativa en español, por favor, use la función de levantar la mano en su pantalla y por favor, levante la mano ahora. Tori, can you please let me know if anyone has raised a virtual hand?
I see no hands in the audience, and just a technical note, we do not have video feed here on Zoom.
Okay.
They are working on that, Lori.
Perfect, thank you.
MassDEP's Jamie Gonçalves, if you could kindly please introduce yourself and provide us with messaging in Portuguese.
Chamo-me Jamie Gonçalves e trabalho para o MassDEP na seção de resposta a emergências. Se houver alguém presente que precisa de assistência interpretativa em português, por favor, levante a mão. Se você estiver participando remotamente, use a função de levantar a mão na tela.
Tori, please advise me if there's any hand that has been raised necessitating Portuguese translation.
I'm seeing no hands.
Thank you. Next, we will have Nadine, who will help us get the message out with regards to any translational services in Cape Verdean.
Minha Nadine Sanogueira, minha intérprete crioulo, cabo-verdiano. Se tiver alguém presente que também de assistência de interpretação na crioulo, por favor, levanta a mão. Se você participa remotamente, por favor, use a função na página para levantar a mão.
Thank you. Tori, do we have any virtual hands raised indicating they need translation services in Cape Verdean?
I'm seeing no hands.
Thank you. As I said previously, this information is being recorded and will be posted on MassDEP's website. The purpose of this session is to provide clarifying information about DEP's proposed Title V and Watershed permit regulatory changes. Additional information can be found on DEP's website under the Title V webpage. Please make good use of everyone's time. There are many people here tonight and online who want to participate. In the interest of allowing everyone an opportunity to ask clarifying questions, we will be limiting everyone's time to 2 minutes. The purpose of this information session is to provide people with an opportunity to ask questions that seek clarification concerning the proposed regulatory changes. If you wish to comment on the draft regulations, there will be 2 opportunities for people to provide their comments concerning the proposed regulatory changes. These are the official public hearings, and there are 2 upcoming public hearings, one on January 24th and another on January 25th, 2023, or you may submit comments in writing during the public comment period, which ends on January 30, 2023. You can send those comments at dep.talks@mass.gov, and please include Title V and watershed permit in the subject line. Tonight, we will provide more information on the proposed regulatory changes in two ways. First, MassDEP will provide you with a brief presentation that provides an overview of the proposed regulations and addresses some frequently raised questions. Second, we will receive and respond to questions raised by you, the participants. For in-person participants, if you wish to ask a question, please sign in on the sign-in sheet with your name and, if applicable, your affiliation, and indicate if you wish to ask a question. We will receive questions first from in-person elected and appointed officials, and then online elected and appointed officials. After that, we will call on in-person participants in the order they signed up. We will start taking questions from remote participants after 1 hour has lapsed. After that point, we will call on remote participants who indicate they have questions by writing the question in the question and answer function on their screen. We will read the participant's question out loud, and if we don't understand the question, we may ask the participant to clarify it. After an hour has lapsed, we will allot the remaining time to in-person participants and then to any remaining remote participants, concluding no later than 9 p.m., as that is when the facility closes. If you need language interpretive assistance, the individuals that are helping will do their best to understand, and we have established that there were no services requested here tonight. So we will now begin the public informational session, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, Ms. Mary Beth Chubb, who will be giving the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Millie. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Beth Chubb, and I'm the wastewater section chief out of the MassDEP Boston office. Am I joining or not? Yep. I can. Can you move that one? How's that? Is that better? Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is provide a brief overview of the proposed amendments to Title V and the proposed new regulations for watershed permits. There is a more detailed presentation available online, previous one that was recorded, and I will provide information on those websites to you as well. So, going backwards. Currently, the revisions that we're proposing to Title V focus on nitrogen-sensitive areas. Currently, under Title V, we have nitrogen-sensitive areas for drinking water purposes. These are for new construction in drinking water protection areas, such as Zone 2s, interim wellhead protection areas, and areas that have both on-site septic and non-public water supply wells. And for these, we impose a loading restriction of 440 gallons per day per acre. There is no change proposed to these provisions in Title V. What we're proposing is to establish a new nitrogen-sensitive area that we're calling a natural resource area, nitrogen-sensitive area. And this nitrogen-sensitive area will apply to new construction and existing systems in areas that are designated as natural resource area NSAs. Watersheds that have nitrogen total maximum daily loads, or a scientific evaluation such as a Mass Estuaries Project report quantifying nitrogen impacts. And there will be two different types of designation. One is automatic designation when the regs are promulgated, and the other will be through a public notice process. So the first group, those that will be automatically designated upon promulgation of the proposed amendments to Title V, are watersheds that are subject to the Cape Cod 208 plan that currently have a nitrogen total maximum daily load that's approved by EPA. All of the Cape Cod communities are subject to the Cape Cod 208 plan, which EPA approved in 2015. And there are currently 30 watersheds on Cape Cod across 11 communities that have EPA-approved nitrogen TMDLs. So this is one of the maps that's available for information online. And you can see the key with the different colors. So the Cape Cod communities are in the darker green. And I'll go through the other two colors that are denoted. But I also want to point out that the areas that are not colored does not mean there isn't a watershed in that area. It just means that that watershed has not quantified nitrogen loads to establish either a TMDL or have an MEP report, the Mass Estuaries Project report, or a scientific evaluation. So it has yet to be determined. So again, the first group that'll be automatically designated, those 30 watersheds on Cape Cod in the darker green as shown on this map. So the second group, those that would be designated at a later time through a public process, are watersheds on the islands and southeastern, south coastal Massachusetts. Some may have a TMDL, some may have an MEP report, some may be starting a scientific evaluation to quantify their nitrogen impacts and impairment. And it also includes Cape watersheds that don't currently have a TMDL. They would be in this later group that would be designated. And the designation would happen through a public process. So an example of that second group is noted in the lighter green shade on this map and also in the teal color. The lighter green meaning that those watersheds have a final nitrogen TMDL. And DEP may at a future date designate that area as a natural resource area, NSA. And the teal color noting those that currently have an accepted Mass Estuaries Project report, but they don't have yet a final nitrogen TMDL. And again, the beige gray areas yet to be determined. So what does it mean when the watershed is designated? For individuals with septic systems for new construction or existing facilities, if you are in an area designated as a natural resource, nitrogen sensitive area, you would be required to install best available nitrogen reducing technology within 5 years of the effective date of that NSA designation. The second option is if the community applies for and obtains a watershed permit. So again, the timing for implementing that requirement is for the Cape Cod communities with the nitrogen TMDLs under the 208 plan. That NSA effective date is the date the regs are promulgated. For the other communities, those that are the islands, southeastern, south coastal Mass, or a Cape community that does not yet have a nitrogen TMDL, the effective date is at a later time, going through a public process of designation.
So the exemption,
Sorry. The exemption from the individual system owner being required to upgrade is if the community obtains a watershed permit that covers that area that septic system is in. Then that requirement to upgrade with best available nitrogen reducing technology in 5 years per Title V would not apply. The community, if they were not quite ready to apply for and obtain a watershed permit, can submit a notice of intent within 18 months of the designation to say that they do want to pursue and outline a schedule of how they want to pursue the watershed permit. So this depicts the details that I've just gone through. The upper level, the green boxes being those 30 watersheds on Cape Cod, automatically designated when the regulations are promulgated. that would start the 5-year time clock for those individual systems in that watershed unless the community filed a notice of intent that they were going to pursue a watershed permit, or if the community was ready to do so, applied for and obtained a watershed permit. Similarly, but at a later time, the other communities would be designated through a public process by DEP, the other watersheds. Once the designation happened, that would start the time clock, that 5-year time clock on the individual systems. Again, unless the community either submitted the notice of intent that they were planning to pursue the watershed permit, or if they were ready to do so, apply for and obtain the watershed permit. So in addition to those proposed amendments to Title V, we're also proposing new regulations for watershed permits. Watershed permits are 20-year voluntary permits. They are issued to local government units, multiple government units through an intermunicipal agreement with each other, or regional government units. It allows a community the opportunity to utilize a greater range of solutions to address water quality needs, including alternative and innovative approaches. And it utilizes an adaptive management approach, which means a community can test an alternative, see how it works, if it meets their needs, and then adjust and adapt their approach to address the water quality. The watershed permit is based on a town-approved watershed management plan. So the watershed management plan is a long-term plan to address existing water quality impairment and restore and protect water quality. It can be a comprehensive plan, it can be a targeted watershed management plan. Comprehensive plan must be designed to reduce nitrogen loads by 100% within 20 years. But in the regulation, DEP does have the ability to allow for at least a 75% load reduction and may determine an alternative schedule is appropriate based on watershed specific issues. So we've done a lot of adding additional information to our webpage. And this is where you can find a lot more detailed information, previous information session recordings, presentations. The first link goes to our public hearing page. The public hearings will be next week on January 24th and 25th, and they will be online. And you will log on to this page and you can register to attend the hearing if you wish to make comment. We have a lot of information out on our regulation pages. So 310 CMR 15 is Title V. If you put in Title V and go to this webpage on mass.gov, you will see a section for proposed amendments. And we have a lot of information there. Again, we list the dates for the public hearings, comments, how you can submit comments, and maps. And the map that was previously shown in this presentation, and other details. And also the watershed permit regulation page has the same information as well. Just letting everybody get the picture. This, by the way, will be posted as well, this information session. Okay, so last night we had our third information session. Tonight is our fourth. And then, as I just mentioned, we have the additional public hearings next week on January 24th and January 25th. Those are remote only, and there is a link on that public hearing page that you need to register for the remote public hearing. The comment period has been extended till January 30th at 5 p.m. All comments submitted must include the name and contact information of the person providing the comments. You can submit comments by email to dep.talks@mass.gov. Please include Title V and watershed permit in the subject line. You can also submit written comments by mail to MassDEP, Bureau of Water Resources, Division of Watershed Management, attention, Title V and watershed permit, 100 Cambridge Street, 9th floor, Boston, Mass. 02114. Some of the information out on our both regulatory pages, there's a background document on, the why of these proposed regulations, and also the natural resource area NSA map. That was the one in this presentation earlier that shows you watersheds that have either a nitrogen TMDL or a Mass Estuaries Project report, or in development of that. And then we also have a nitrogen sensitive area online viewer where you can look up your address. You can put your address into this map and see if you are located in one of these watersheds. And we also have frequently asked questions available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And those are being consistently updated as we get questions. DEP contacts for the Southeast region, Millie Garcia Serrano, the Regional Director for the Southeast region, Gerard Martin, Deputy Regional Director in the Southeast region, Drew Osei, Wastewater Engineer. And then we also have Jen Viveros, Ian Jarvis, Brett Rowe, Bob Green, Martha Sullivan, and Jeff Gould. You can contact any one of those people if you have questions. In the Boston office, Kathleen Baskin, our Assistant Commissioner, Weldon Langley, Director, myself, Mary Beth Chubb, Wastewater Section Chief. Maria Pinode is the contact for the State Revolving Fund. Any financing questions? And Timothy Jones, who is with us in the back of the room, who is our policy person. With that, I will turn it back over to Millie. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mary Beth. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so.
Did it get turned on?
Okay, so I apologize. So at this time, we'd like to understand if we have any appointed or elected officials in the room wish to introduce themselves tonight and perhaps ask any clarifying questions. Okay, if you wish to come to the podium, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Sean McDonald, Town of Dartmouth from the Select Board.
Oh, is it on?
That's not on. Hello? Hello. Okay, I guess I gotta lean in. My name is Sean McDonald, I'm on the Select Board in the Town of Dartmouth. My apologies. I thought this was a comment period, so I reduced my comments to 4 questions. Question number 1, is the timeline established for these rules pertain to a lawsuit by the Conservation Law Foundation, whereby a court date is set for March to complete these rules? The second question, why wasn't any municipalities part of this process? We should have been. That's part of good open government. Third, why did it take months to obtain the names of the NSA committee when this committee is a public entity under 350 CMR 15:040? And finally, DEP has known about this issue since the mid-90s, as stated by a former member of the DEP, who was a member of the NSA committee in a hearing. Why has it taken so long to address this? Why is it not being pushed? Why is it being pushed on municipalities and not being discussed statewide? In regards to the process that has happened, several of us are under the impression that these rules were done illegally. We're going to be filing an open meeting law violation on MassDEP on this whole process. With the
30 seconds remaining, please.
And we'll see where that lies.
Thank you. You want to take the question, or do you want me to take the question?
I don't know the answer.
Okay, so we are asking for clarifying questions, but we'll certainly ensure that any kind of feedback with regards to the CLF lawsuit, that is outside the scope. We're here tonight to talk about these proposed regulations. I do want to say that MassDEP has been working since the inception of MassDEP receiving the authority of Title V. Title V is a regulation that it's locally implemented through the boards of health. So this is not new. Eutrophication is not new. And MassDEP has seen a lot of progress across the board, not just on the Cape, the 30 towns, 52 watersheds, but also the South Coast, South Shore, Buster's Bay communities. We have seen a lot of progress, as you will be able to see on the website. We appreciate your comments. We take those comments to heart, but this process has not been designed to stop any ongoing work, whether it's development of targeted or comprehensive watershed plans.
And I'm gonna, is mine on?
Sure.
Well, could
Well,
we finish
okay.
answering?
Answering these
Mr.
questions first, please.
Thank you. And then we'll, yep. So in terms of the group that, we met with on these regulations, so in 2017, well, 2015, there was an executive order by the governor, Executive Order 562, requiring DEP to evaluate all of its regulations. And from that executive order, we received a dozen comments pertaining to Title V and groundwater discharges. And because we had that scope of comments, we formed a stakeholder group. The participants of that group are in the FAQ document. That information is available. It is the first page. The stakeholder group had numerous participants and included boards of health organizations on it. MHOA, MIHA, other, Inky Onsite was on there. MMA was also a participant, but the complete list of who participated in the stakeholder group is available in the FAQ. One of the questions we received or comments we received from EO 562 pertained to the nitrogen sensitive area provisions of Title V. And so we created an NSA subcommittee from that stakeholder group. And the participants of the stakeholder group were invited to participate in the NSA subcommittee. And the people who accepted that invitation are also listed on the FAQ, on that front page of the FAQ. So that information has been provided.
Yeah, I just want to also just comment before we move on to the next official in-person here, that since the issuance of a letter by the former Commissioner Martin Suberg in the summertime, we moved forward with almost 50 meetings. We went up and down the Cape, also the South Shore, as well as Buster's Bay, Dartmouth, Westport, other communities participated in that process. And clearly, we're here tonight to listen. We're here tonight to better understand your concerns, questions, and answer clarifying questions. But our work does not stop beyond having these meetings. We still have opportunity to comment through the end of the month, and all those comments are being reviewed and processed accordingly.
Millie, we've got a question on why are we doing it now, since we've known about it since the mid-90s, and I can take. that.
absolutely.
One of the gentleman's questions was, since DEP has known about this issue since the mid-90s, why are we doing this now? And, you know, the collection of data, validation of data, evaluation of the water body's impairments is something that does take some time. We apply a rigorous scientific process to that. Mass Estuaries reports were completed for the 30, well, for all the watersheds. And then in addition, for the 30 watersheds on Cape Cod, an additional step was taken of total maximum daily loads, which is another rigorous process to ensure that the findings of those reports were accurate and correct, and that the finding was that they didn't meet state water quality standards. The Environmental Protection Agency also has to approve those TMDLs. So, you know, that is, as you can hear, a lengthy process, but with rigorous scientific intent behind it. Following that, wastewater engineers in Southeast, like Drew and others before him, began meeting with the towns, particularly those on Cape Cod, and a variety of efforts were taken to try to, you know, identify solutions to this. Some of those towns began to prepare and develop targeted watershed management plans or comprehensive watershed management plans. And we've been working with various towns since that time. So yes, it's a lengthy process. It's intentionally rigorous and lengthy to make sure that we've got the science right. And we're moving this forward now because, you know, the science that we have applied to this tells us that it is necessary to do something about the watershed impairments caused by nitrogen.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to invite other members of appointed or elected officials.
Hi,
Gonna introduce
my
yourself?
name is Michelle Keevan. I'm an elected member of the Board of Health with Dartmouth. I think everybody that's here tonight is for clean water, is for protecting the environment. But what is at issue is putting the burden on the homeowners. When you look at the statistics, it only represents 14% of the nitrogen load. And it's going to be extremely expensive for homeowners. And from what I can tell, we're basing it on data from 20 years ago. It would make sense to take a look at where is the current nitrogen load coming from. We've got a lot of composting operations that Dartmouth has been taking with food that is contributing to nitrogen. We've got an open pipe in the harbor dumping storage into Buzzards Bay. I mean, there might be bigger problems contributing to the nitrogen than the 14% coming from homeowners 20 years ago. So I think what we're asking for is common sense action. We love the fact that you're taking action because we're way behind everyone. We realize that, but it isn't very fair to just say, okay, the easy solution is we're going to make the homeowners go and do this. That's like the easy way, but it's not going to really fix it. So we're asking you to take a step back and reevaluate and see where are the nitrogen flows coming from, and then see how we can share the burden, because it shouldn't just be the homeowners that are responsible for fixing. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. So, thank you, Ms. Keegan. Thank you, Ms. Keegan. We appreciate that comment. And in fact, that's the very comment that MassDEP wants to hear. Why? Because we have provided an option and it warrants partnering with the municipalities so that we can better design and implement strategies to address nitrogen. Each community is very different. Not all communities are similarly situated, which is why it's very important to ensure, as Leldon described, to get the science right and customize the strategies for that particular municipality. So thank you. Thank you for that comment.
We already have a couple of other comments to that, unless you're
Okay.
back for you.
Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. There are additional sources of nitrogen, as the Board of Health member indicated. And there are other measures that can be taken to control nitrogen. For example, at farms and in composting facilities, there are typically best management practices, BMPs, that are put into place. And those are the methods that are typically used to control composting or, nitrogen sources in agricultural settings. In addition, also, it was mentioned that the New Bedford combined sewer overflow, a combined sewer overflow is where stormwater and sanitary waste mix together. And during rain events, when the pipes can't take the capacity that is, they fill the capacity and they result in overflows, then there is spillage of both stormwater and sanitary waste into the waters. Throughout the Commonwealth, there are 19 permittees who have CSOs. There's about 199 CSO outfalls in the Commonwealth. These are indications of, cities that are older in their infrastructure. Billions of dollars are being spent to address combined sewer overflows and to either eliminate them or to reduce them and to minimize the chance that they will overflow. The city of New Bedford has spent, several $1 million to undertake those kinds of controls. Every community that has a combined sewer overflow also has a long-term control plan. They have entered into an administrative consent order with the Environmental Protection Agency, and they are required by that consent order to undertake those measures in the long-term control plan on a schedule to eliminate or reduce those overflows from combined sewer overflows. So it is correct to say that there are other sources of nitrogen. They are accounted for in all of the TMDLs and the MEP reports. And there are measures being taken in other instances to control those sources of nitrogen. Also, a community is only responsible for controlling that portion of what is considered to be the controllable load. So there are sources of nitrogen that are such as atmospheric deposition, for example, that are not considered part of the controllable load. So it reduces, the amount of the total that has to be addressed by any particular municipality. A mention was made of 14% in Dartmouth. One really needs to look at individual watersheds on a case-by-case basis, look at what each of the TMDLs or MEP reports says about those watersheds. So for example, the TMDL for the Slocum's River and Little River area of Dartmouth, the total waste from that area is about, or total contribution of septic from that area is, I believe, either 23% or 29%. But that load is really coming from the Slocum's River watershed. Very little of it comes from the Little River watershed. So this is another reason why the watershed permit can assist municipalities in sort of tailoring or designing their plan to address where the sources of nitrogen are coming from.
Thank you. Okay, next, any other person appointed or elected official? If you don't mind just holding the mic close to your mouth, that would be great. We want to make sure we capture your question or comment.
Sure. My name is Jim Whiten, and I'm on the planning board in Westport. And we have other people here from Westport too, Steve Willett from the select board, Tanya Wright from the Board of Health. There's others. I am very glad to see DEP finally addressing this issue. We've been trying to get DEP to address this issue with us for over 15 years. And has little low. There's a couple of things that I would like to ask about, in terms of the regulation. One is if it is septic systems, you're going to require everybody within the watershed to be in place or to improve their septic system to the best available technology. And apparently there's a couple of technologies under testing at the testing site. I think that if you're going to require in Westport 7,000 septic systems to be upgraded to the best available thing without saying that it has to be to a certain level of notification is quality. I don't think that whoever is making those septic systems could produce enough septic systems in that time frame, let alone for Dartmouth or Wareham or the Cape.
30 seconds.
That is, I think I'm tentative. The other issue is that if we go with a 20-year plan, but we have to reduce the nitrogen by 75%. And the way that you figure that is 75% of the septic load instead of getting below the TMDLs that are already established. And I think that is a poor way to do it also. I'd like to hear why it is that you chose those things, because we're close to our goal now. And if we have to do a 20-year plan, we have to reduce 75% of the existing septic load nitrogen. And what is that? I mean, how do you quantify that? I don't know if you can do that. Thank you.
So I just want to remind Mr. Whitten that that's the proposal, the 20 years, 75, and we are accepting comments on that point. We will happily accept your comments, and we're taking comments from everybody. Does anyone on the team here would like to respond to the 75%
Yeah,
agreement?
if I can just clarify one thing about the watershed
Can you
permit.
speak up?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now? No? Now? Can you hear me now? Oh, okay, I wasn't close enough. So if I can just clarify about the watershed permit, in the applications, it's expected that the targets are 100% of the nitrogen threshold. Now, the nitrogen threshold is what's adopted into the TMDL. So that's what we're targeting. The 75% comes into a factor for the flexibility on a case-by-case basis for watershed. But we are aiming for 100%, and the 100% is septic load and also loads from fertilizer, stormwater. It's not just the septic. We're looking at the other sources as well. But in many of the watersheds that have been studied, septic has been the majority of the contribution, and that may not be the case in every watershed. So it has to be taken on an application by application basis specific to that watershed. But the target is 100% of the load, because that's what's going to promote habitat restoration in order to get the eelgrass back or the benthic habitats.
And I
you.
would like to just speak to the best available nitrogen reducing technology and appreciate your comment on that. So as previously noted, current Title V has nitrogen sensitive areas for drinking water purposes, and we have technologies approved that went through performance to meet the requirements for those purposes. Similarly, now we have technologies coming in to demonstrate lower values, two of which are in our performance testing phase called provisional use, that are looking to demonstrate meeting 11 milligrams per liter and 10 milligrams per liter. We have two technologies that are in the entry level piloting phase one of which is a combined nitrogen and phosphorus removal technology just coming in. And there is at least one other technology currently at the Mass Test Center in Barnstable looking to demonstrate, and that is a leaching system. So the technologies are coming, and the rationale behind the best available nitrogen reducing technology is that over time, the technologies are going to demonstrate and better their performance. We have a couple of technologies that came in originally, in 1995 to demonstrate meeting the drinking water protection needs, and they're looking to come in and be reevaluated potentially to demonstrate that they can meet lower. So it will take time, yes, because we want to fully vet these and approve them, but the technology is improving and it is already in the process of being evaluated.
Okay, do we have another appointed or elected official here? Please come to the podium, and if you can, kindly please speak directly to the microphone. MassDEP at the other end is having a tough time ensuring that we capture your comments.
Good evening, my name is Chair, Public Works, also a professional geologist, 25 years of experience in coastal management, groundwater, surface water issues. I have several questions. Why is DEP focused on nitrogen when managing estuaries needs to recognize that there are another number of other significant issues such as phosphate, sedimentation, pathogens, invasive species like crabs and phragmites. Oh, by the way, nitrogen is the issue, nitrates. My second question is, what is the legal nexus for tying a Title V retrofit requirement to watershed plan? My third question is, why are these regulations being imposed on the west side of Buzzards Bay when geology, hydrology, and land uses are fundamentally different? For example, the town of Dartmouth does not rely on the salt storage aquifer, and we do not have any nitrogen problem in our water source wells. My next question is, how does DEP expect the town to regulate nitrogen sources over which it has no authority, such as
30 seconds.
agriculture and composting? And finally, why has DEP seemed to have truncated EPA's good approach to watershed planning by cutting out a number of the initial steps, which include developing consensus among local stakeholders that allow common understanding of problems, issues, and builds consensus on meaningful solutions. I suggest to you, if you've done that, just move forward. Thank you for your comment.
So as we noted, we are providing two options. The first option squarely rests on Title V, which is the authority that is directly affiliated and associated with septics, and the data shows that nitrogen has a direct link with septics. Option number two talks about watershed permitting, which basically hits on all the buttons that Mr. Albee has noted. The ability to capture more cleanup, remediation, treatability of other constituents beyond nitrogen. That's been proven. Secondly, it provides a little bit more flexibility to also incorporate restoration projects that get at Phragmites and other invasive species, as Mr. Albee has noted. So that's my short answer to very thoughtful questions. And I just also want on the record to go that MassDEP is in constant communication with the US EPA Region 1 points of contact, both wastewater and the water division. Thank you. Any other elected or appointed officials?
Christopher Michaud, Director of Public Health in the town of Dartmouth. First, I'd like to thank Billy and Gerard in the Southeast region. Cooperating with us on many, different matters, including records of wetlands in the name. Which leads me to my first question. Why is it that MassDEP has not responded to records requests through the Boston office? All the hundreds was the simplest, which ties to what Mr. McDonald said earlier. We still have records that are due to us, and as Secretary of State Gallagher puts on his informational document, informed citizenry is better equipped to participate in the process. So why is it that the Boston office is withholding those documents, particularly those documents that were requested from the NSA, that we paid $1,275 for? That acutely the department responded on the 10th day that they just got the check and they were getting to work on it when tracking showed that it was there 10 days early. So Mr. Moore in the application is called records, because when I appealed to the Secretary of State 7 business days ago, the acting commissioner did not respond. This is perfectly relevant to this process with the question here. Unless MassDEP is telling us all that an informed citizenry doesn't matter because they know better than to bring it down our throat. And I think
30 seconds.
my department, because on June 1st, the Commissioner Stewart, I was actually pulling out and where 4 days before. The state order was reported at the Barnstable County Superior Court. I keep thinking that we were not going to find it. So it's very disingenuous to tell. They're doing this because we're concerned about actually when the department knew about it. These low-cost guest workers along the department cell phones are not some individual town by town concern. This is a unique situation along the low price point in the southeastern Mass. So it's not something that should, happen at the local. This is a Commonwealth issue. So I expect a run-around question again, like around a very powerful press. So I don't expect you to answer that because to me, the record is clear. Lastly, I'd like to know how DEP can explain in their mission statement how they feel that this process here, where they immediately acquiesce to the Conservation Law Foundation and sue, and gave them the 5 years, exactly what they wanted. And then you can say, well, we gave you the watershed. Well, that's also, as Chuck mentioned, well, they gave us options.
Please try to finish up.
Because one is an unfunded mandate, they give it to us strictly. The other one is what they gave to the Conservation Law Foundation. This is not in keeping with their mission statement, which says that we want to follow all of human agency decisions. Pretty closely to the mission for this job, for these regulations. So this is a done deal. Thank you for all turning up tonight. And lastly, what I'd like to know here is, thank you, Senator Martin, and Representative Christopher Martin. I got word late tonight that Senate bill has expired in regards to this. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Michaud. Any other elected officials or appointed before we go online?
Sure. we can
Yeah, I
answer.
mean, I would be more than happy to answer, except that this is not a clarifying question, but I will go on record to say MassDEP continues to work with all of the affected parties here, which is municipalities on the Cape, Buzzards Bay. In Southeast Region, we have 84 cities and towns, just the Southeast Region. We manage over 100 programs. MassDEP takes this issue very seriously. This is what we do, day in, day out. So I hope that you see an expression of wanting to partner with all the municipalities. We have constant communication, Mr. Misha, myself, Mr. Sean McGinnis from the town. This is very specific to Dartmouth. And we understand that there's a lot of more work to do, but we cannot solve the problem unless we come to the table in a civilized, partnered agreement, partnered approach, because the science is difficult. There's a lot of balancing. There's a lot of financial, there's a lot of policy, there's a lot of things that need to come together to the table. So I hope tonight is the beginning of a very important conversation. If we have any other elected officials or appointed, we would happily like to have them on the podium. If not, we'd like to turn it over to the virtual. I don't know, Tori, if we have anyone virtually.
I see no elected officials raising their hand, and so far nothing in the Q&A indicating an elected official has asked a question. Elected
We're gonna
representative.
go, so we're gonna go directly to the public who came out here tonight, and we're gonna do this starting with those who affirm this remotely. So we'll start with Pam Lindo, New Bedford. Oh, okay, thank you. Michael Dalio from Dartmouth. Good evening, please proceed to the podium, much appreciated.
I'm Michael Dalio, live in Dartmouth, retired. My question, first I'm going to make a statement. Then I'm going to make a question. The cost to do this upgrade could be between $30,000 and $100,000 per system. Now there are approximately 2,000 systems applicable. This would total to between $60 and $200 million come out of the revenue. That's in a 5-year period if they're designated nitrogen sensitive area. Now, my question relating to this, what specific testing, such as the dot test, was done on individual septic systems that are installed in highly impervious soils, which is where I am. That excessive nitrogen is getting into the estuary for you to determine this one size fits all.
Thank you for your question. Mary Beth, would you like to maybe talk a little bit about the experience of the Barnstable County Septic? Is that, or the Mass Test Center?
Well, actually, I would speak to the cost of the system. So in looking at the two technologies currently in provisional and the information that they have provided, there's a cost range of $15,000 to $35,000 per system. There is funding available, and DEP does, if I may, thank you. DEP is continuing to seek funding and to ask about funding. Governor Baker, before he left, requested $200 million to be put towards this, and only 15 million was approved. 15 million is good. But we continue to seek funding for these proposed regulations. And then I would, for the rest of the question, would defer to Drew on the studies and analysis.
Yeah, so just a quick clarifier that with the watershed permitting approach, it's not a one size fit all. The strategies put in place are specific to that watershed and what would work for that watershed. And in terms of the monitoring through the Massachusetts Estuary Program, monitoring was done on the septic systems, as well as identifying all the sources of nitrogen that would impact the bay. In addition to that, they did monitoring on any of the surface water bodies, the streams, anything that would cause attenuation in between the sources of nitrogen and the bay. All of that was incorporated into the model, and then we could actually calibrate the model with, again, more monitoring in the embayment to analyze what are the concentrations that are associated with habitat restoration, because it is identified that there's impairment in the water bodies. And somewhat speaking to a comment that was made earlier, yes, there are other impairments, other constituents, but the focus here are nitrogen TMDLs. And so all of the studying has been centered around that. And all the Massachusetts estuary projects are posted online. We are continuing to evaluate and open the door for scientific evaluations, and so that other entities can execute and conduct these studies in areas that we haven't yet. And the areas that we continually need to study is in the South Shore area as well as the islands. So pretty much covers it.
Thank you. Next, Nicole Plant.
Good evening. I am the owner broker of EBQ Realty. I have owned this company for 18 years. We do 90% of all our transactions in the septic system. We are the gatekeepers of Title V as renters and brokers. We teach classes on Title V, and no subject goes through this community without our license realtors. There is loopholes in Title V. I would be the first one to say there's massive loopholes in Title V. And yes, the regs need to change, but not this way to hurt the consumer. My first question is, why, and we have loopholes right now in Title V that cash buyers can get through and sign a piece of paper and they do not, the Board of Health does not feel comfortable to put in a new septic system. We need to go back and look at that. There is a loophole in Title V that families can transfer to each other and never upgrade their septic system. That needs to be looked at. The general consumer does not need to pay for families transfer to families. We also, the only people that are going to suffer are the people who have mortgages and the sellers who need to sell to get under these regulations. They are now, and I continue to have a bad, they are $50,000 systems right now. I do live in my property in Westport. I have a whole property in Dartmouth. I do will be affected $100,000. I've had engineers look at my system if it passes right. Will this permit stay in place? So you are offering a permit to hold to give us time. Will it stay in place, or are all these companies going to have a stigma? I would like to know that all these people who are sitting in this room want to know if they will list their home, if they are going to have to wait for the numbers to grow and get a phone call and a certified mail to say, oh, by the way, I'm looking for the $50,000 system. I've also talked to bankers. There's not enough money in this grant for them, and there's not enough line of credit for some of these people. They will be backwards. We will deal with short sales and foreclosures, and the stigma in our area. This is not fair. You are traumatizing certain areas. There are not enough grants. This will hurt the actual consumer. There are common sense ways to endear Title V. Most Board of Health do not check our well water. We are talking about estuaries and eelgrass. I grew up on the Westport River. I live on the Westport River. I will tell you right now, we are not fully consumer. We are not mandating that they pump every 3 years. We are not mandating that if no one has a record of their septic system, they're getting away with it. They don't even know what's been around like what it's doing. Do you know that half the people who have certain ages have not pumped their septic ever? But you are going to go to everyone in this room and say, here's a $50,000 bill because they've done the right thing. They've pumped their system, they've maintained it. The people who care are here. The people who don't care are not here. You're penalizing the wrong people. We need to also talk about the regs for I think we can all should address that. Everyone, if you're going to do this, is put on the consumer, they can start fertilizing, see how we can do it before we. So please help the consumers out here, and you're going to have mass exits on the South Shore, and you are going to have significant losses. So please pull this rag, stop and act like me and teach. We'll ask for people to help you, but please, this is not the way.
Thank you. I want to remind you again that MassDEP has been meeting with every single municipality. Some municipalities actually asked to meet twice and 3 times, and we will continue to meet because it's a decision as to whether we proceed with option A or B. But we appreciate your comments, Ms. Plant. Please put them together, send them in. We really do appreciate your comments. And our intention is not to penalize anyone with regards to nitrogen. And I want to underscore that. Next, Harry Booth. If you could kindly come to the podium. Thank you.
In the children of the Watershed, I have subject. Someone pointed out tonight there was a broken sewer pipe, things in the Buzzards Bay. I had nothing to do with that. And since really, someone pointed out that this was basically a issue, not just shouldn't fall on people that don't have to lose their homes. So it's a case where something like something that would go over sewer systems. I mean, I know this is expensive, but could funding be raised to help the town of Dartmouth expand their sewer systems that work? We know that. And then there's another thing. Has DEP certified these septic systems? So you don't go put in a $50,000 septic system and it's, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. You know, so these are questions that I need to should be answered. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you. So, yep.
That's all right.
Yep, go ahead. You wanna?
Sure. So we do think that there are better solutions than replacing every Title V system, and that's what we've been trying to convey with the idea of a watershed permit. The gentleman who just spoke talked about sewers. There are additional funding sources for sewers and other types of wastewater controls through the state revolving fund. The state revolving fund is a loan program that is managed, a low interest loan program that is managed by MassDEP. And in it is money that is contributed by the federal government. And we have 2 bills that were recently passed, the bipartisan infrastructure law and another bill called ARPA, which is COVID relief bill. Both of those are providing significant amounts of funding to Massachusetts as well as to all other states. And so we're going to see an increase in SRF funding availability as a result of those 2 bills in the coming next few years. Now is the time to do wastewater planning. Now is the time to plan for the future for a comprehensive wastewater infrastructure that will help to support your community and ensure that the water quality in your waterways, which I know that you all appreciate, and is largely one of the reasons that you live here, will stay clean and available to you.
So, Mr. Booth, I appreciate your comment. That was really spot on. And in fact, we have also experienced or learned about other municipalities' experiences with smaller scale wastewater facilities like smaller package plants. Also, other technologies like permeable reactive barriers are working towards attaining those goals to reduce the nitrogen. So these are the kinds of conversations, ideas that are wrapped into the watershed planning proposal. And again, a municipality can pursue one and skip the option of basically improving on the septics, replacing the septics. So again, it's a choice. It's what we're trying to convey tonight. And again, a host of alternatives, some that are traditional, like wastewater storing, and some that are non-traditional. We've seen some examples, such as oyster propagation projects, floating wetlands, things like that. I don't know, Drew, if you have any other comments, for example, in Wellfleet. I know it's the other side of the Commonwealth, but with the 95 project.
No, that pretty much summarizes it. As I've said previously, the towns, we will work with the towns to devise a plan that's specific for that watershed. Even looking on the sub-watershed level and making sure that the implementation strategies match whatever the sources are. It doesn't have to be, or actually it won't be a one strategy plan. There'll be multiple different technologies used to get to the goal. And that can include IA technologies, and it can include a lot of other technologies, but it doesn't have to be just upgrading IA systems.
Thank you. Next is Sotiris Paulus. From Westport. Okay, next. Jim Costa, Dartmouth.
And if you could speak directly into the mic, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's
There we
better.
go.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure. Could you tell me, maybe Greg, or what's involved with this system? What, like for instance, I have a holding tank and I have a leaching area. What's involved with a nitrogen removal system, and how is it maintained? And the second question is, if I were to have an older lot that was built in the 50s, 60s, or the 70s, it's 100 by 100, and there's not enough room to put on this new type of system, does that lot become unbuildable? That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm not working. On.
Yeah. And just while Mary Beth is getting the mic, oh, mine is gone too, so.
Where, no. Oh, sorry. So they're both on. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So there's different configurations for denitrification, but the ones in provisional use currently right now are installed between the septic tank and your leaching area. For an existing system, depending, there's always, there can be size, lot constraints. A system would have to be upgraded to the current Title V code using maximum feasible compliance, meaning you do the best you can. There's also other options that are coming out, such as a drip dispersal unit that's trying to demonstrate nitrogen reduction. That allows for tubing for your leaching area. So there's various options that are being tested and that can be utilized.
I think also what I,
No. And to the lot question, so in terms of upgrade, what we call an upgrade under Title V, if you have an existing system and you were installing this unit, you would come into compliance with the current requirements of the code
as best you can. That's what we call maximum feasible compliance. It would not make your lot unbuildable or unusable if you could not utilize, a specific system. You have to come into compliance as best you can.
Okay, next we have Betty Bayless. Betty Bayless, Dartmouth. No. Okay. Chris Fay.
Chris Fay, I'm a Dartmouth resident, I'm a civil engineer by trade. At last night's meeting, there was some discussions about some projects on Cape Cod regarding flushing of some of the embayments. As DEP looked at, at the mouth of the Slocum River, there's a major shoaling issue, a lot of sedimentation. You can walk out probably waist deep water, several hundred feet off of the coastline if you're on Lloyd Demer State Park. A lot of the tidal characteristics have changed over the years along that coastline, starting with the building of the causeway for Gooseberry Island. There's been coastal changes from major hurricanes. As DEP looked into dredging or opening up the channel for the Slocum River to promote tidal flushing, that could help to take some of these contaminants out of the Slocum River. Curious as to that, and I just want to close with a comment. Some of the costs that have been cited here tonight of the, I'll call it the $15,000 to $35,000. Those are numbers right now, but this area in particular is not a designated NSA, and that would probably come at a second or third tier. So with the inflation that we're seeing at this point, those costs, you can pretty much double them. I mean, the construction industry, the costs are off the charts. If you plan for a project today and you put it out to bid in a year, you're getting sticker shock and you're getting a de-scoping of projects just because the money is just not there to meet what the bid prices are. And lastly,
30
one of the
seconds.
questions that was asked about the inquiries earlier about the NSA subcommittee and how that info could be found in the FAQ, that doesn't address the clear foot dragging that's been seen with open records requests in that nature. Ultimately, this process feels to me, it's like an arranged marriage. It's not something that's mutually agreed to in the spirit of state and local government partnerships. There's two options that are on the table, but Dartmouth and these neighboring communities here really did not have stakeholder engagement that's been discussed going back several years. With all due respect, I just find those responses to just be disingenuous. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. So we're going to get to a discussion of the Slocum River. Gerard and Leldon are going to talk a little bit more about that. I do want to agree with you, Mr. Fay, with regards to the inflation and cost. That's one comment that has been a repeat theme as we have journeyed throughout up and down the coast, engaging with all the communities, consultants, homeowners. I mean, we're seeing it across the board. So we are taking that into consideration with regards to how to address that in the final equation. But I do want to also tell you that I believe in reset buttons, and with the engagement that we're trying to bring about with this new idea about the watershed permit, that's where the creativity and the options coming from the towns and the citizens in the towns can be folded together to have a better product that, again, is customized for the needs of a community. So I just want to directly address that because I deeply care about the environment and those that we serve.
So, Mr. Fay, I just wanted to try and respond to part of your question, one of your questions about opening of the Slocum's River. You're correct in saying that dredging can improve tidal flushing. That's a tactic that is used frequently on Cape Cod. You'll notice that a lot of the salt ponds on the Cape have permanent openings that are, held in place by groins that keep those, or jetties that keep those salt ponds open. There are other projects where tidal flushing has been improved by the replacement and enlargement of culverts. One notable case of that is in Muddy Creek, which is located in, I think, either Chatham, right at the Orleans border, where passage over one of the tidal creeks at Muddy Creek was improved. And that did greatly improve tidal flushing there and, reduced the amount of nitrogen in the water body. I don't know if the Slocum's River has a current, dredging plan or proposal before it. That's something that we can look into. But typically those kinds of dredging, projects would be funded by the municipality. Sometimes they're funded in conjunction with the Army Corps of Engineers or other parties. So that is one of the solutions that DEP is including if the watershed permit option is chosen.
Okay, so,
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
So, as Loldon said, inlet widening and dredging are strategies that can be incorporated into a watershed permit. And so when we're working with the towns, we encourage that they run a model so they can have a cost benefit analysis to see how much nitrogen would be reduced from using those strategies. So I just wanted to add that to it as well.
okay, so we have 16 more individuals that wanted to offer comments. We also have some individuals online. We are at a decision point because we want to make sure that we accommodate everyone. The facility closes at 9. So we're going to try to move this along a little bit. We're always here to try to answer questions. So let's press on with Donald McCormick. Donald McCormick.
Hey, thanks for coming tonight. Interesting meeting so far. So, hey, I worked in the government for a long time and change management's hard. There's 2 approaches to change management, right? There's the stick and carrot. Clearly, option A is the stick. Option B is the carrot. There's also an inclusive approach. You guys say we took it. From our perspective, didn't happen, but we'll let that go for now. I think the second question really is, if we go to option B, which is the watershed permit, there's things like, and there's been a lot of discussion about the composting permit, composting farms. Those are encouraged by the DEP, as far as I can tell, because we have, or town of Dartmouth has provided instances of violations and nothing's happened by the DEP. And farming is a big part of Dartmouth, and we don't want to stop that in Dartmouth. But that's the Department of Agriculture. So how do you work with those other agencies to actually help us through this process?
We are currently working with MDAR, which is under the EEA, Energy and Environmental Affairs Secretariat, to coordinate and harmonize our approaches. But I can definitely tell you that we have identified some strategies that include, for example, access provided and given and available, permeable reactive barriers to ensure that, coupled with the best management practices that are required for a farm, they come together. So we are looking at all the possibilities for that.
Put this on the town of Dartmouth, which is what, if you put this on the town of Dartmouth, thank you, which is what this really does, right? The watershed permit. Do they have the authority to go shut down a farm, a composting facility that is not meeting the requirements?
And we would be happy to speak with you on that separate and apart item that rests with different authorities that are not the subject of tonight's conversation.
Okay, but they're all interrelated. And if you don't have them all interrelated, then you're doing a half-assed systems engineering job. So, as the engineers will tell you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick.
I was just wondering, when you call people up, maybe if we call 2 people up, it will go a little bit faster. We don't have to wait for people to walk up and down.
Good idea.
Sure. Call the person to speak and then the next person who's
On deck.
Okay, so do you want to continue here or do we move to
Yes.
online? Yes. So,
So just to clarify, we are continuing with the people who are present here for the next half hour. We began the timer, we're trying to do it evenly, so we're doing an hour here and then we'll do an hour online and come back to anyone remaining who wishes to ask a question after we go through the online folks.
okay.
So we still have 30 minutes.
So we're going to call upon Robert Powell, and next on deck is Christine Galinas.
I'm Robbie Powell, live here in Dartmouth. It occurs to me we need to be thinking outside the box, and that does not seem to be what's going on. We're talking about septic systems and old technology. What I can tell is you're proposing something like 10, $20 billion in capital cost, plus whatever your costs are as an agency. It just seems to me we should be looking at a technology that is affordable. It's a Massachusetts problem. It's not a Dartmouth problem. It's not a, it's a wetlands problem throughout the state. And this is just not appropriate. Go back, think outside the box, and come up with some technologies people can afford, subsidize it, finance it, make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we called on Christine Galinas. Thank you. Michael Antonio. Jordan Narft. Jordan. John Powell with Karen Gonzalez on deck.
Yeah, I'm John Powell in Dartmouth, and I am also treasurer of the Allens Pond Association. And we finance the reopening of the gut when it closes off. My brother asked a question, I'm going to answer it. Composting toilets, cheap, effective, technologies well along. We don't even put the stuff never gets in the ground. And couldn't we just do that?
So to answer your question, composting toilets are an approved alternative system. And what we would need to do is quantify the nitrogen removal of a composting toilet. Because there is a gray water aspect typically to a composting toilet. So it's not it's not zero, but it hasn't been quantified. So we would need to quantify what its actual nitrogen removal was. But yes, it is a potential option for use.
And just to note also that the town of Aquinnah also commented on that very potential solution. And they noted that the challenge is quantifying, as Mary Beth explained, just because maybe it's seasonal, maybe it's all year round. So it's being able to quantify. But thank you. That's a great idea. Next, Karen
Yeah.
Gonzalez.
Hi there, I'm from Westport. The DEP themselves put out these pie charts, one for the Slocum River, and we got one for the Westport River as well. Okay, they address things like the septic system or, the overload and agricultural runoff. But my question is did anybody address things like waterfowl or all the thousands of seals there are in like Monomoy and Falmouth? Like the Slocum River alone, if you know anything about that river, there's giant flocks of geese, swans. But how do you pinpoint that and just dump it in, like the taxpayers' lap instead of, assuming maybe it's not just us? That's my question.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry, next on deck, just so we can prep the next person, is Paula Swanson.
thank you for that comment. And you're correct that, a portion of the nitrogen is being contributed from natural sources. It's decomposition of leaf litter, other kinds of organic matter, certainly wildlife, seals, and others that you named. Unfortunately, I can't see the pie chart you're referring to, but I have looked at, a variety of the TMDLs and MEP reports, and they break down they break down the nitrogen load into the controllable load and the uncontrollable load. And so we are not, we don't generally consider those sources that are coming from natural, natural deposition from the atmosphere. Let me clarify my answer, please. Okay. We don't consider those to be sort of a debit against the town. You're not responsible for controlling the load that is coming from wildlife or that is coming from other natural sources like leaf decomposition and so on. What we're trying to control is that portion of the load that we know that, humans can control through various kinds of activities that we can engage in. Our waste, for example. So we do consider it when calculating the load of the TMDL, but it is not considered to be part of the controllable load because we don't have a way to prevent geese or seals, from defecating or urinating in the water.
Okay. Next, I have Paula Swanson. And on deck is Ted Cagle.
Howdy, everyone. My name's Ted Cagle. Gerard, Millie, always nice to see you. I thought this was a comment period, but a lot of the questions that I had have already been asked. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I will provide written comments because this is not the appropriate forum, I guess. But there are some questions. The Title V groundwater stakeholders group included no homeowners. How does that comply with the public involvement requirements? And you've referred to a lot of things as INA, innovative and alternative technologies, but you haven't elaborated or really defined what those are. If those technologies are going to require implementation of mechanical equipment, aerators, blowers, in between the septic tanks or the leaching field, is it going to require a treatment plant operator? Are we going to have to file DMRs? If there are violations of whatever standards are set, who's liable? The owner, the operator, joint, and several liabilities? These are all questions that need to be asked. 9 years ago, I bought a house in Westport. I upgraded my septic system to the tune of $35,000. And so am I going to have to then find money I don't have to put another $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 in there? Or is my upgraded septic system viable enough to meet whatever is going on? And if there is going to be a technology, innovative and alternative technology that requires some type of mechanical equipment, it's got to be powered. Electric bills are already going through the roof. I have a swimming pool. When I run the filter in the summer, my electric bill goes up $40. If I'm going to have to pay for powering mechanical equipment year round, I'm 70 years old, battling cancer. I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income. Where are we going to find these funds? And even if DEP finds resources to provide loans, or the town provide loans to the towns, and then they put them as 2% or 5% betterment on our taxes, I just think it's really unfair, not having been included, not me personally, but generally town representatives in that Title V groundwater group. I think I appreciate your intention and your mission, but I think it violates the public trust. And before I get on a rant, which you
Please
guys
wrap up.
know I'm well capable of doing, I just have one other question. For the last couple of decades, DEP has had this, I don't even know how to articulate, a moral and ethical mandate about environmental justice. Where does environmental justice come in here by opposing these kinds of undue burdens on homeowners? Most of the people that got up here tonight have been elderly, probably been on the properties they're living in for a long time. I lived in Middleborough for 30 years, which isn't part of this function, but you know, eventually you're going to look at septic systems everywhere. And comments by the real estate people are seriously valid.
Sarah,
So,
please conclude soon.
Thank you. I think your time is up.
To wrap it up.
Mr. Cagle.
so, again, I have more questions than I can generate right now. I'll send them to you in writing.
Please.
Thank you. Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle. Mr. Richard Ibarra, and on deck would be Walter Pacheco. Thank you. So, Mr. Walter Pacheco? Is that, okay. Anton Amaral? Bob Caton? Okay, thank you. Richard Medeiros.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Bob Caton from J&R Precast. I pretty much supply a lot of the septic tanks in this area. So I have a few questions for you guys with Title V. I'm kind of up to date a little bit on stuff. But these new systems that are coming in, are they going to subsede what's already on the market now that the homeowner can get? Or is it something that the new ones are just going to oversee what these D-Night systems are going to be? That's a question I have. And then the second thing is the contracts with these systems, they go to certain people and they don't open it up to get everybody involved as far as a precast or a manufacturer. So they kind of corner the market so that a person gets the system, the vendor per se, and then they got the market cornered. So they spec it and then it's just, it's got to be that. And they're paying the premium dollar, which I think this should be where when these systems get put in, they should be a general purpose. Anybody that does the manufacturing should be able to get the permission and the permits or whatever we got to do, because some of them we have to get certifications for, but everybody should be able to do it. Not just pick a certain person that this company wants to have do it, and then it's just everybody's got to pay through the nose. That's what's going to go here. I mean, I do a lot of work in this area, so I know what's going, I do a lot of work and we do some alternative systems now. So, I mean, and the other thing is, I think with DEP, we need to get together as a precast. I'm involved in an association that's a Northeast association. So I'm actually the treasurer. But anyways, we should be able to get a meeting with you guys solely when this goes down, so we can explain and do all this stuff. You know what I mean? So we know what's going on. You know what I mean?
Thank you. We appreciate
Yes,
that.
thank you. Can I ask you to clarify your first question? I wasn't hearing it correctly. Are you asking about if the D-Night replaces the whole system or?
No, I'm asking like now, there's some D-Nights on the market right now. I don't really want to name names, but there's some we were already selling for some names. Are them D-Night systems still going to be viable? Are we still gonna be able to use them systems? Or these new ones that you guys haven't said what they are? I know one of you kind of hinted on drip system, so I'm kind of familiar with what that is. So is that the systems that we're going with? Or are we gonna be able to use the drip and we're gonna be able to use what we use now, like the no ecos and that stuff? Or is it just gonna be the new systems?
So the systems that currently have general use
Yeah,
are the ones meeting 19 and 25 and are currently best available nitrogen reducing technology.
that's, okay,
Will also maintain their purpose for drinking water protection area NSAs.
yeah,
And then as technologies come through and are approved and attain general use, they would become best available nitrogen reducing technology. I appreciate your comments because the details of, is it a specific number? Is it a range? Those we have to address and
Right.
look at. But that is the idea that as the technology improves and the performance improves, you would have a list of this is best available nitrogen reducing technology that can be utilized in a natural resource area NSA. And I would also ask to your later points that you could email me directly for that conversation.
Cards so we can get an email going.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, because I'm involved in this association with the Northeast, there's a bunch of us in the association, so. And I think some engineers definitely, should be involved. I mean, I do this stuff every day.
Mhm.
And engineers, even, they don't have enough knowledge from the people that are selling this stuff, they do not do a good enough job, I think, to notify and give the interest in what needs to be done. They don't have enough stuff. They don't do enough seminars. And I'm not blaming the engineer. I'm blaming like the corporate people that they're selling this stuff. You know what I mean? Is they don't have, there's not enough information out there.
Yep.
So it's a day to day, it gets to be a lot of work. And then you put a price together for the homeowner and then it's not, they put it on the plan, but it's not exactly what they want. They want something better, so, and then it costs more and then you got to go back to them to do it, so it's just, if we get more knowledge, it would be a lot better off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so we have 15 more minutes and 3 more individuals for comment. Al Broom, and next on deck would be Ralph Maderos. Al or Ralph? Okay, please. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Ralph Maderis. I've lived alongside the Slocum River nearly all my life. And I've seen it go from being a very healthy river to with lots of eelgrass, oysters growing, to virtually very little eelgrass and virtually no oysters. Once in a while, there's a cycle of a little bit coming and going. But my question is, I think most of this pollution is coming down from the Pascamanget River, the runoff from the golf courses, homeowners, fertilizing lawns, things like that. And I think there was a little bit of an improvement when a storm created a channel through the sandbar down at Barney's Joy and helped flush the river out. And I think dredging that to remove those nitrates would be very helpful. Also, Save the Bay has been taking water samples for years. What are the results of that? What did they determine where these nitrates are coming from? I haven't seen many houses built on the river. Yes, there's been some, but not many, not that many in the last 60 years, 70 years. So I don't think it's just the cause that's caused this problem. And I think Save the Bay should come out with what they've put together in their studies of this pollution. They don't discuss that. And I think that should be discussed.
I appreciate that. That's information that would go ultimately into those MEP reports that we're talking about, but we'll definitely follow up on that
Well, I
point,
think you
Mr.
should come
Maderos.
clean with it and say where
Yeah.
this is coming from.
Yeah.
I know they're in favor of having this system installed. Okay, but let's come forward with the information they've obtained over the
Yep.
years of collecting.
Yes.
I know people could contribute to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have John Downing. And next on deck would be Laura Hadley.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm from the Cape, I'm from Barnstable. And one of your options, like you said, was the watershed thing. Yet both Falmouth, which has the most watersheds on the Cape, and Barnstable have both come out and said to you guys, we cannot get the intent for you by 18 months. It's gonna cost too much money and take too much research and planning to do it. And the response they got from you guys, and I was there when you guys said it, was figure it out. So what happens when they can't figure it out? Because they don't have the time or the money. My neighbor, an elderly couple, just put in a $15,000 septic tank. They don't get the permit. 5 years from now, they have to put a 35, 40,000 new septic tank in. Well, 5 years later, they're planning on having sewer on the street, so now they're gonna pay $30,000 to get sewer. Just because they couldn't get the plan in, because they are honest saying they can't do it in 18 months. The second thing is someone mentioned composting toilets and you said, well, we don't know how much nitrogen it's going to remove. You're not telling us how much nitrogen we have to remove. So there's no specs. How does that make sense to anyone? The next question, ready, is these new systems. How do you expect homeowners who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are barely making their mortgage, barely putting food on the table for their kids, to be able to find a way to find another $40,000, $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 to replace the system that's already working? Let's do some common sense. If you're building a new house, require it. Your septic tank fails, require it. If your septic's working, let it be until it fails. Help the homeowners here. And help the town to give them more time to get their plans in place.
Thank you.
So if I
So,
can just clarify, so the 18 months for the notice of intent, that's actually to present a schedule to apply for a watershed permit. It's not necessarily expected that a full application would come. That's just to give us a heads up on how long it would take for the town to put together a watershed permit and submit that to us for
Then
review.
that needs to be clarified with the towns, because the towns have been told there is a full, not the full plan, but a schematic of the plan and a draft of the plan. And from what, again, Falmouth and Barnstable have both said is they cannot meet your requirement for the intent in the
Right.
18 months.
Right.
Both money-wise and planning-wise.
Yep. And
So-
we're determined to work with the towns. And Barnstable and Falmouth are in a good position because they are conducting comprehensive wastewater management planning and targeted watershed management planning. And those are the heart of a watershed permit. So that puts them in a great position to apply for them. And lastly, how much nitrogen or total nitrogen to be removed, that's in the TMDLs. And so when we were talking about composting earlier and not being sure of how much that reduces, you can quantify that within the context of a watershed permitting, within the context of a watershed permit, doing post and pre-sampling to really quantify how much is reduced so that we know how much that works towards the TMDL.
Yeah, and I would just add that can you hear me? Yes. I just add that, the issue of the length of time is one of the issues that has been raised in our prior public info sessions and public comment periods. It's definitely noted as one of the issues that DP needs to address. We've not started, making revisions to the regs. That process comes after the conclusion of the public comment period, which is scheduled now to end at the end of January.
Just finally, on that point, we have been meeting specifically with the town of Falmouth for, I believe that's where Mr. Downing is speaking to. They do have some complicated watersheds and not every size fits all. And as we talked about, that's where working directly with the municipalities to better understand their situation, that's going to change the complexion of the time and the strategies. But for the most part, a lot of communities are already doing a lot of work, and that could be credited down the road. So last in person requesting to speak is Laura Hadley. Laura? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Laura Hadley. I'm a clean water enthusiast, human, attorney, and entrepreneur. Someone said, before you criticize someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. The proposed regulations are problematic for 3 reasons. First, it doesn't solve the problem. Second, it doesn't ensure the use of the best technologies. And third, it sets up an extortionary structure. First, in our small watershed, there's a farm with 500 cows. On average, 1 cow generates 14 gallons per cow per day. That's 2.5 million gallons per year. Question 1, why should I have to upgrade my septic when the 500 cows and their 2.5 million gallons aren't being addressed? Point 2, it doesn't ensure the best technology is used. The Cape Cod Commission 208 plan lists 66 different categories of technologies that can be used to solve the problem. What this does is picks option A, one subset of one of those categories, and then gives local volunteer groups and local administrators the authority to delegate out $40,000 and $50,000 bills, and to whom? Third point, it's setting up an extortionary system. You can't delegate this kind of ability to take someone's house, someone's livelihood, to a group of volunteers or local administrators with no accountability.
30
no
seconds.
Requirements, and just let them run amok. It makes no sense. It's not going to solve the problem. What happens when these regulations are abused? What's going to happen then? Do you just get to take my house? Does the person in my town who I cut off by accident in traffic get to take my house or force me to pay their friend with a new technology company? What then? Why should homeowners be forced to bear the cost of a problem that we all got ourselves into? This is short-sighted and we can't do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the in-person, and we're going to move with the virtual questions. People that have been.
I hear that this system is out and you can readily get it if you need to, is what it sounds like today. The question is, if you have a Title V, it sounds like you're going to have a new system between the leaching field and the holding tank. If that is correct, is there a monthly, quarterly, or yearly fee for this new system? Is it just a box as what we have now, or does it have electronics in it? Another question is financing. I'm sure everybody here has the money, whether it be 15, 30, or $100,000. Who is the financing going to be through? Is it through the town, or is it through the state? And or is it going to be held against you or a lien on your home if they are putting in some sort of a loan from whomever? If you could please answer that. Thank you.
So to speak to the technology, there are different technologies that some are passive. Depending on if they need pumping for to put it through the treatment system and out to the field, and others are leaching fields themselves. So those would be examples of a passive system. Requirements on the system depends on what level of approval it's at. General use technologies typically have an annual monitoring requirement, and they do require oversight once per year inspection by an operator, a certified operator. And if they're in provisional, there would be more frequent monitoring required, typically a quarterly monitoring requirement and oversight.
the certified engineer or the certified person needs to come out and annually check it. Do we know what that fee is? I mean, we're looking right now, people that have a septic system, no yearly fee other than having it pumped out. But now we're talking about electronics, electrical, possibly gonna have to upgrade their systems with just electrical, never mind a sewerage system. Do we know an annual fee on that? Because I'm sure it's not put into this $15,000 to $30,000 that we're thinking about.
So we have teamed up with Barnstable and their IA database system. And I actually reached out to ask them about operating costs and the range of costs for, depending again, if it was the annual or the more frequent monitoring of the provisional, was $1,000 to $2,000 per year.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I asked the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the virtual part. Folks have been waiting online for a while, and then we will come back to this group so long as we can accomplish that before 9 p.m. Okay, Tori?
You're ready to, so actually, so for the online people, I'm sorry, we're gonna go through the questions from the online people who have joined us remotely. I will be reading the questions and then allowing people on the panel to answer the questions. So, and I apologize for the people online if I mispronounce your name. Please accept my apologies. The first question is from Verena Lazinski. Why is the cost of this upgrade the responsibility of the owners? This is beyond the control of the owners. Why doesn't the state/town pay for this? So I think we have spoken somewhat to this this evening. There is funding available for homeowners through the Community Septic Management Loan Program.
I'm sorry, would you kindly please, for the public, if you could provide a little bit of space and time for us to ask the questions and also respond to the questions? These individuals are listening online. We really appreciate your ability to let us continue on.
Thank you. So for as I was saying, the Community Septic Management Loan Program is an option for the individual owner. There are other funding sources available for municipalities under the watershed permit route, through the state revolving fund, through the Clean Water Trust, through EPA. An example of that is the SNEP program. And DEP does continue to seek and look for funding sources and seek funding for these provisions. Anyone have anything to add? Okay. So the next question is from Stephen Nojim. If a community is designated as nitrogen impaired and there is no permit applied for, does a home need to have its septic upgraded at time of selling the house, even if it is only 1 year into the 5-year grace period? And Stephen, the answer to that question is no. There's a 5-year period of time to upgrade that system should the community not pursue the watershed permit. That is how the regulation is currently drafted. There is no requirement at the sale of the house except to notify the buyer of the location that the house is in a nitrogen sensitive area. Carl Moberg asks, how do you know what the baseline nitrogen discharge is at the present time, in quotes, for the town of Westport into the Westport River watershed? As a follow-up, how will you determine if a community plan has the feasibility of reaching 100% reduction in 20 years?
Yep, I can take that one. And so when the MEP was being conducted, they took actual samples from that system and then calibrated and created a model that can be reused with implementation strategies. So then when you put the implementation strategies into the model with the levels of reduction that's expected, you can see how much you're going to get within its location. And so that is how it would be modeled towards meeting the 100% reduction. So in short, it's reusing the models from the MEP.
Okay, Carl has a couple other questions. Why is the age of a septic system not being considered when it has to come into compliance with new regulations? By an arbitrary phase in time based on the date communities are designated. If I just built a house last year and the system is only a year old, I would have to phase it in within 5 years. The average life of a system in the region should be considered in the phase in time for septic systems. So the provision in the draft regulations is speaking to the area that the system is located in. And an existing system would need to be upgraded to comply with Title V, again, under the upgrade provisions and maximum feasible compliance. There is a provision in the regulation for a 1-year, Tim, I'm gonna, a 1-year caveat if you have installed the system within 1 year of the promulgation. And I'd like to double check that. But
Yeah,
we did get the comment and we have put that into the draft.
Right. And these comments are being captured, so they will be
Yeah.
part of our comment resolution process.
Okay, and Carl, last question, do you have a simple pie chart that shows the percentage of nitrogen load by source, specifically the specific percentage from homeowner septic systems into the Westport River watershed?
Drew's got it.
Yeah, you can follow up, Leldon, but I was just going to say that, again, that will be in the Massachusetts Estuary report, as well as Westport does have a town planning document. And so I'm sure that the nitrogen reduction amounts and the sources are cited in that plan document, or town planning document as well.
Okay, David Ray, if a homeowner cannot upgrade in the 5-year time frame due to conditions such as lack of vendors, equipment shortages, financial burdens, etc., what will happen? And so this speaks to, so the Board of Health is actually the approving authority for homeowners and their septic systems, and DEP would be working with the boards of health in these situations if they come about and people are not able to upgrade. But it's a comment, good comment. Barbara Pereira, what is being written into this new regulation that will take into account the extraordinary cost associated with these septic system upgrades?
The watershed permit is a new regulation that provides that option, so we don't have to move forward with the septics. That's the body of the new regulation, which is a brand new set of regulations to accommodate for, that's the option B that we've been talking about tonight, which basically is working with the town to enter into a permit so that we can have a combination of strategies rather than focus on all of the septic upgrades.
David Ray asks, how do you plan to regulate the cost of installing the systems so that contractors and vendors do not take advantage of the demand because of the proposed regulations, which is currently 5 years? So in terms of the cost for installing the approvals speak to the technologies, needing to offer classes to train people to install their technologies, and DEP would be working with the technologies to ensure that that was happening. But I would encourage David to submit that comment.
We don't basically, we do not, regulate price gouging. But you've. So, Mr. Downing, we have the Consumer Affairs section, which is not part of MassDEP, it's the Attorney General's office. That's the answer. Well, it's my understanding, so I'm not here to say anything else, but what I understand is the process when we have that consumer fraud issue. I can't speak to foresee in the future, but I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Okay, Barbara Pereira asks, virtually 100% Dartmouth septic owners will be in an area that may be designated as an NRA NSA. How will we even know if our own private system does not meet the criteria in this area? Is this area based or individual property based? The second part, how will an elderly retired person be expected to foot this bill to install the required technology? Realistically, how much of the cost will be covered by the funding that you just mentioned? So, speaking to it, so we do, if I'm understanding, Barbara, when you say, how will we even know if our own private system does or does not meet the criteria? Is that meaning you're in or you're out of that area? We have the map locator that's available online where you can input your address to see if you are in a watershed. And it is by property, but the watershed is a area based, and Drew can speak into more detail on that. We have spoken to funding, and again, DEP has posted resources for seeking funding on its webpage, and we are also continuing to seek out funding sources. Do you want to speak to the watershed?
Yeah,
Delineation?
so the watershed delineations?
Well, to her question, I'm sorry, how is the area based on individual? Is this area based or individual property based is what she asked. The nitrogen sensitive area.
No, it's based off of the hydrogeological flow under the ground. So as the water flows towards the embayment or estuary, that's how the delineations came to be. And then they were refined within the MEP or moving forward scientific evaluation of that watershed or embayment system. So that's how the lines are delineated. And then in a way that I kind of interpreted the question is kind of the use of the systems within watershed permitting. There would be a monitoring program within the watershed permit to assess the efficacy of that strategy, whether it be an IA system, a permeable reactive barrier, whatever it be, looking at, if there's a water use component, using that with the concentration to create the actual load so we can assess how much load is being removed through that strategy.
Thanks, Drew. David Ray asks, why are the regulations focused on homeowners and their septic systems instead of the better holistic plan through statewide and town communities, and why the 5-year time frame to implement? So Title V deals with septic systems, and DEP has authority under Title V to regulate those septic systems. And that's why that requirement is there. The timeframe in development of these regs and in community outreach, we heard from both sides, some asking for shorter timeframes, others asking for longer timeframes. And so we met in the middle with the 5-year timeframe. in those discussions, but again, still taking comments on any of the proposed regulations. And the watershed permit are the regulations we put forward for the towns and communities to address and have more opportunity for funding and apply a tailored holistic approach to address this. David Ray also asked, it seems like new systems are still being tested, so why are you changing regulations before you know these systems can work efficiently and properly? And I think Weldon earlier spoke to, this has been a long ongoing process, the development of the science. The Cape is farther along in its development, and so we're moving forward with these regulations to first address those communities. And we're seeing it already, but you will see technologies coming forward and improving performance and being developed in response to these regulations, and we're already seeing that happen. Verena Lazinski asked, given that this issue will become worse for our area in the future, are there any plans for the town to limit new construction which will require septic or any other construction which could impact our waters? And we can't speak to what a town is going to limit or do in terms of their building. That would be a question you should bring to your town. Oh, I can't see the hands. Okay. To the people who are on remotely, if you are raising your hand, if you can put your question into the Q&A, then I will be able to read your question. I unfortunately have a limited view and I'm not able to see hands being raised. So, no, we have a few more. So David Ray asked, when you test the water, how do you know the percentage of controllable versus uncontrollable nitrogen levels? How can you tell the difference from natural sources and septic sources?
So the difference is explained within the MEP reports as the monitoring is done at the locations of where the sources are. And so as they take the samples from the bay, you have what's in the bay, and that can be calibrated with whatever's in the bay, salinity or whatever other constituents. And then there are assumptions made when it comes to stormwater runoff and fertilizer based off of data that is taken from golf courses and typical uses of fertilizer. And then I believe the stormwater, the rain events is taken from the USGS. And so a lot of it are standards based off of the geographical area. But then when it comes to septics, as kind of what the question is pointing at, there was actual data taken from septics. It was debated on what the actual influent concentrations are, but that was settled when it came to the actual impacts on the bay. And then attenuation was assessed via looking at the water bodies in between those sources and the bay. And the attenuation could be refined over time with more monitoring, but they settled on what data they could collect within that time period.
This is an anonymous attendee asks, if a brand new septic system installed 2 years ago, will it meet the criteria or will she need to use this new nitrogen removal technology? The proposed draft regs, you would need to install the nitrogen removal technology if within 5 years of designation, unless your town pursued the watershed permit.
It depends on what the technology they install. It is possible.
Yes, if the question reads, it's a new septic system, so if it did not have nitrogen removal, then yes, would. Okay, David, I'm just going by, because you've had repeated questions to get to some of the other people. Kevin Duggan, for those of us who purchased homes where sewage exists on the street, but we have septic, what relief is there for us to hook up to sewage? What is the estimated cost to hook up to sewage?
I think that's an interesting question that we should dig a little deeper because we have new funding, federal funding with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And it's predicated on the provisions of that bill. If a community already has monies that are earmarked through this bill. So I'd like to look into that question.
I think there's one other answer to that, which is, it might also depend upon whether there was capacity in the sewage treatment plant. So you'd need to know that by speaking to your Board of Health or the DPW that runs the plant as to whether there's sufficient capacity to add, additional homes.
Yep, that's a great question.
Okay, so going through, Verena asked another one concerning the cost question, that the additional 1,000 to 2,000 in operating costs is a burden. And Verena, I encourage you to submit your comments, either written or through DEP talks. Darren DeGrasse or DeGrace, when Metro Boston needs public state funding, it seems to go through without question. Most recently, for just the Green Line extension, we as taxpayers paid over $2 billion. Never mind the MBTAs. Why is it so easy for the state to fund any project? So again, we have lists for funding sources. I can't comment on, the Green Line funding. What is the penalty for a homeowner that doesn't comply, upgrade within 5 years? Again, it would be Board of Health enforcement and with DEP assistance if needed. But appreciate the question and, it's a good comment to submit also. Michael asks if you have a septic system that was installed for a 4-bedroom house and your children have moved out and there are only 2 adults left, could you be compliant with your acceptable nitrogen levels being dispersed through the system without an upgrade? It's an interesting concept. The system's designed for 4-bedroom with 440 gallons per day flow. I do not have an answer for you tonight, Michael, but ask if you can submit your question to me. I can respond. Are there, and what would the typical monthly operating costs for these new septic systems? We have spoken to that. They are going to vary depending on the type of system. And again, it was a range that I was provided of 1,000 to 2,000, depending on the system, the need for a pump, the need for electricity. They do a general use certification require annual inspection and oversight. Len, we are developing, Len Coriati asked to avoid redundancy, will you post all questions and answers? So this whole session is being recorded and it will be posted on our website, on the Title V website. All of the questions read and answered, obviously will be in that recording. And also we are continually developing our frequently asked questions document, which is also out on our website. Michael Rossi asks if the town works with your mandates, would the focus shift to the rivers, dredging and mosquito cuts, for example, and away from the septic system?
Well, this exercise is focused on nitrogen, and any other efforts would need to be processed through the correct program. I'm not sure specifically with regards to mosquito, whether it's any kind of aerial spraying or what is the reference time back to that. But again, the public informational session is just focused on the proposed regulations which speak to embayments and eutrophication.
Mark Lutman from Westport, will MassDEP give consideration for towns that have proactively implemented mitigation to reduce nitrogen loads and showing successful trends towards and/or meeting targeted threshold nitrogen TMDLs prior to designating those watersheds as an NSA? Is there a provision for exemption if criteria are met via local efforts that are successful? Drew?
Yeah.
Simply answered yes. Simply answered yes. We can consider actions that are taken before a watershed permit. Within the watershed permit application, they would just have to present to us what that strategy is, how it's going, show us what the reduction has been in their quality assurance plan that they've been enacting to make sure that their numbers for monitoring that are reliable. But yes, we can take in strategies before they have a watershed permit or before these regulations are finalized.
Right. And I think we talked about the fact that Title V has been around for a while. The proposal tonight specific to Title V is to develop a new category that addresses ecological habitats versus the original Title V, which looks at directly the correlation of septics and drinking water. So with that in mind, there's a lot of work that has happened over the last decades across the board, not just in the Southeast region, but across the Commonwealth. And therefore, all that body of work would qualify with regards to arriving at a more focused, precise strategy. And MassDEP is definitely relying on the body of work, past work, that a lot of towns, cities and towns have actually executed to date.
Hilda Mangate speaks to compost toilets, and that I, Mary Beth Chubb, should be aware of a study done by George Horfelder at the Mass Alternative Septic System Test Center. So thank you, Hilda. I am aware, and to clarify my comment on compost toilets, while they have an alternative system approval, that approval does not incorporate a nitrogen performance standard. So what I meant was we would need to review that, review data for it, more than just the one study that was done, and quantify that amount for the compost toilet use. So thank you, Hilda, for that comment. So Carl Moberg asked, does the quantity of nitrogen from a leach field disperser lessen with its increasing distance from surface waters? In other words, is it consumed on its way to surface waters?
Can you repeat that question?
Does the quantity of nitrogen from a leach field disperse or lessen with its increasing distance from surface water? In other words, is it consumed on its way to surface waters?
Well, that depends on the watershed. It seems to be a question centering around attenuation and what the factor of attenuation is. And that really depends on that subwatershed as the spatial distribution of nitrogen flows through whatever system that may be, or natural land, or if it's very close to the embayment, if it's just a straight shot. Regardless, there is a factor of time of travel from the source of nitrogen to the bay. But in terms of how much that's reduced, that has to further be refined within that specific system.
Right. And I just want to offer on the Cape, groundwater moves 2 feet per day, so it's a sandbox. That's a different situation than other situations that, for example, were presented tonight with till and some other types of soils. So it's all predicated on ensuring that we have a customized, very specific strategy predicated on where we are and what the goal is. So that's where the engagement with DEP and municipalities, that's why it's so important.
Hilda Bengay asks, can the state revolving funds be used for non-traditional technologies such as composting toilets and urine diverting systems? And the answer to that, Hilda, is if they are part of a comprehensive plan, then they can be eligible for SRF funds. Anonymous, does having your septic pumped annually assist with decreasing nitrogen levels? It is not something we have considered. It's an interesting comment. Could annual septic pumping be part of the watershed permit in pre and post monitoring levels? So, yes. Thank you. We can consider that. Okay. And yeah, and last appears to be last comment, I think, from Stephen Nojam. Thank you very much for your presentation and answering questions. We all want clean water, but as you heard, this approach could be financially onerous and thus infeasible for many state residents. So yes, thank you, Stephen. And I believe, and Tori, you can let me know, I believe we have answered all of the questions that were submitted through the Q&A.
And if we have, oh, go ahead, Tori, sorry.
We do have 3 raised hands in the audience, in the virtual audience.
Okay, I can, so are we going to ask them to submit through the Q&A or?
Can we hear them?
Or can we?
I think there's
unmute
an
them?
option where you can unmute the person.
Yes, I'll go ahead and unmute.
Please, thank you.
First up, we have Hilda Maingay, and next on deck will be Michael Rossi.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm Earl Barnhart. I'm Hilda's husband. I'm going to speak for her. My name is Earl Barnhart. I live in East Falmouth. I would like to answer the question of the gentleman who asked about composting toilets. George Hochfelder did a study in Falmouth for 2 years studying the nitrogen removal from composting toilets. They removed 90% of the nitrogen, removed 99% of the phosphorus. It's our research has shown that the best way to reduce water pollution in watersheds is by urine diversion. Urine diversion is a strategy of collecting urine at the household level and not flushing it with 8,000 gallons of pure water. 80% of the nitrogen in the wastewater from a Cape Cod house is in the urine from the house. Over the last 10 years, safe and affordable urine diversion technology has been developed and is being used in Brattleboro, Vermont. Each town on Cape Cod could build infrastructure to collect, store, process, transport, and recycle urine as a valuable fertilizer product for agriculture. Most of the urine from Cape Cod should be exported off to farms off Cape. The urine diversion has the advantage of being the cheapest technology for nitrogen management. The cost per pound of nitrogen removed by urine diversion is 1/10 the cost of sewers or IAs. The lower cost would be more affordable for low and middle income homeowners. It costs $40 a year to have 3 composting toilets in our house. If the nitrogen in urine that's now polluting the Cape were diverted and recycled off Cape, the Cape would avoid spending billions of dollars for IA systems and sewers. Thank you.
Thank you. And I took your comment to mean to be that, a comment. And if you would like to forward that, also, please use the dep.talks@mass.gov. Next, Tori, if you don't mind unmuting the next person.
Yes, next we will have Michael Rossi, and on deck is Albin Johnson.
Okay. Tori, has the person been unmuted?
He's been asked to unmute. Michael, if you can hear us, please unmute and speak.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, great. I did ask my questions and you answered. And the only thing that I was talking about before was the mosquito cuts are just a way to allow the salt water. They seem to think that the river is sort of not flowing freely up into the Slocum. Because of that, it needs dredging. But mosquito cuts just cut into the vegetation, which allows for more salt water. So it's less brackish. That was what I was commenting on before. But that was really just my question was, if you have less people living in a house with an oversized septic system, may they possibly meet the criteria? And the other question was on if the town works with the mandates, would they focus more on the actual areas like the Slocum River and the Pascamanset and everything flows into it, rather than individual homeowners, because they would seem to be having less impact, I would think. I mean, you got issues with the river itself first.
It's a little hard to hear you, but I believe that your question had to do with, sort of the higher loads coming from some portions of the watershed than from others. And that is, one of the advantages of going with a watershed permit is that you can kind of tailor the solution to address those areas that have.
Right. I agree. So I've just, that's why I was hoping that that's the direction you'd go in if the town did comply. And then the mandates on the individual homeowners would be on hold.
Correct.
Yes.
And maybe not even needed.
Yes, it's either one or the other, correct.
Well, that's great. Very good. I had a really entertaining night listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Tori, anyone else? And then we'll circle back, predicated on the time that it's 8:34 now. We have the room till 9 o'clock. If anybody else has additional comments in person, we'd like to hear them.
Next, we will have Albin Johnson, and if someone else would like, oh, he's lowered his hand. If anyone else would like to comment virtually, please raise your virtual hand. I'm currently seeing no new hands.
Say that again, Tori.
I see no new virtual hands.
Okay. There were a couple of additional questions. One was, will there be written transcript of tonight's session available? The recording will be available. Written transcript, I'm not sure of, but you can email me that request. Yep. And are micro sewage treatment systems being considered as an alternative whereby such a system might also have the added benefit of alleviating the necessity of a traditional septic tank and leach field? And I think under the watershed permit, you can utilize, alternatives and different types of treatment systems to address conventional and non-conventional.
Correct.
That answers all of the questions from the remote attendees.
Okay, so seeing that it's 8:35, we'd like to, again, bounce back to the in-person attendees here tonight and recognize anyone that wished to, express comments. And I see a hand. Sir, if you don't mind identifying yourself when you get to the podium, we appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Joseph Louise. I'm from Dartmouth. Been here about 30-something years. It's working. My question is that during all this survey, based on the problems in the bay, was it considered to, when we were looking specifically at septic systems, which are going to impact people very financially, was it ever thought of to maybe do test well surveys to find out whether the septic systems were actually contributing to the bay, or is this strictly a runoff issue or a watershed issue? For myself, I have done test well, surveys on my own well system, where I'm surrounded by at least 15 septic systems, which are aged, and there is no nitrogen in our water. So being I'm right here in Dartmouth, right behind you, Mass. So being able to say that my septic system is contributing to that directly, just the septic system, I can't see it. So I'm just wondering if that's an option to look at, maybe send out a test bottle to, people in certain areas to cover that area to find out whether that watershed restriction is actually viable. And actually impact people financially this way. I do understand that nitrogen is high, and I think that if you really want to make a quick impact, get rid of nitrogen fertilizers. That's, everybody wants a green lawn, I do too, but if you said that you had to do away with it or just ban it from areas, come up with something else. And is this written in stone, number one? Is this whole process that you guys have already done? Is it already done?
No,
No.
we're taking this, every single comment, right now. So I wanted to say first on the testing, that's really interesting. So I've jotted that down.
Yeah, and there's a place right in Middleborough. I took my water sample there. It was a couple $100, but I imagine if you did it in volume by the state, it would be very inexpensive just to look for nitrogen. It's a very simple way to test an area to find out whether or not it's, actually contributing to that watershed.
Got it.
And, I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say specific to, we're talking about basically some towns have actually moved forward with bylaws to better regulate, the application of nitrogen, especially golf courses and things like that. So, that's another option. Again, under the watershed permit, the towns can proactively, have a bylaw to control that source.
And to answer your question about the process, we are in the public comment process, and this is part of that. And next week, on the 24th and the 25th, will be public hearings where you can attend. If you want to attend, register online, and your comment will be recorded and reviewed as we review the draft regulations.
Okay.
That goes till January 30th at 5 p.m. You can also submit your comments through the DEP.talks email or submit it in writing. And we are logging every comment and registering every comment and reviewing every comment.
Okay, thank you.
And then typically after that process, the comment period is completed. So then the DEP staff go through those comments. We, have the potential to revise the regs to address the kinds of comments that we've heard. And then we referred several times in this tonight to promulgation. What promulgation means is that DEP, brings its final copy to the Secretary of State, who then, enters it into as a regulation of the state. So there is a lengthy review process of the comments, revisions made, and then, presumably a final regulation would come out sort of the other end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next. Good evening. Thank you.
My name is Ben Cutter. I'm a Dartmouth resident as well, a new homeowner, and I installed the septic system last year to the tune of about $45,000, and I now find that it is not up to snuff because it does not contain best available nitrogen producing technology or whatever that might mean at today or current time. So I first wanted to express frustration with how these regulations have changed while current homes are being built and permitted, and now all of those things are no longer valid and requiring new upgrades within 5 years. So that's me exactly. I wanted to know what the DEP's position was about providing an economic impact report to citizens like ourselves with respect to how many septic systems in the township exist, how many of them are compliant, what we know about changing install figures, giving supply chain management issues, and then now certification systems with some of these proprietary technologies and some of these other barriers to entry that are going to cost us money. I wonder when or what might come for that for the likes of us. Is what does this mean for the lifespan of our system, the install, the loan costs based on our income, and what federal grants are available for that. I really think that some sort of economic impact assessment for us and for the cost benefit that, granted, we want to reduce the nitrogen, but we all have to put the bill for it somehow. The other thought I had is what a best available nitrogen reducing technology means. I feel like without a permanent figure attached to that and what the approved systems are, we're not really supposed to know what the right goalpost is, or if it moves tomorrow, was that the system I installed next year is now 3 years down the line, the ugly duckling that had some sort of component we didn't know about, it needs to be replaced again, new costs. And then because of my new system, and it's a chamber system and then a pump chamber that sends it all upgrade, I found absolutely no information about what does a modification of the system like that actually look like. And I haven't found any engineers who can tell me.
30
So I
seconds.
just feel like the research is there. So the proof of concept, the proprietary tech that's sitting down in my septic systems now is a kind of corporate bacterial and mechanical filtration system that somebody's tech and they own that. That's a lot different than a pump that pumps upgrade into a sand pit. And then lastly, my area is totally surrounded by seasonal homes, folks that are maybe in there for 2 months a year. And I wonder about how do these systems actually maintain when there's not a steady supply of effluent and there's no real consistent nitrogen. What do these nitrifying bacteria colonies do in the 10 months that nobody's in that home? And how does system maintenance look? So thank you for your time.
So I want to, first of all, thank you for your comment, very valuable. And I'd like for you to consider maybe typing in your address onto the map to see if you are within a potential area for some sort of action. You talk about maybe the seasonality, maybe there's, we've been talking a little bit about watersheds, but even within a watershed, you have a sub-watershed. And it could be that that particular area is not affected. So I just don't want you to stress out just yet. Sure. We want to make sure that we work with you, the municipality, and we are optimistic that we're going to have a solution to this proposal package predicated on the voices that we're hearing today. I really thank you for your perspective, especially homeowners that just invested significant dollars in either upgrading or purchasing a new property and ensuring that they're doing everything they had to do with the regulations at the time. We appreciate that, and that's being considered.
So one other thing is that when any agency, promulgates regulations, there is some economic analysis that has to be done, partly by that agency, but also there are other agencies that get notified and also review, any regulation package. One of the last stop for a set of regulations is administration and finance. And so they take a look at the economics of it, and they do that and then advise directly the governor's office about that. So there is a step of economic analysis in there, but it's further on in the process. Yeah. Is there anything else that we can answer?
You think well, you had numerous questions about the technologies, and I would ask that you email me those directly. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Good evening. My name is Bob Carney and I'm from Westport. And I have two quick questions. One is, my town, Westport, is a border town. And we have Little Compton and Tiverton right on our border, both of which are coastal, towns. So my question is, if I go through this process and everyone in my town goes through this process, but nobody in Little Compton does, no one in Tiverton does, have you taken that into consideration? I know you have no authority over them, but have you built it into your models to see what impact it's going to have on you achieving your ultimate goals of reducing the level of nitrate in the water?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, and a similar question came up last night at the info session. As you said, we don't have authority over the state of Rhode Island. We would have to, I think that what the state is obligated to the federal government to show that we are doing what we can to meet state water quality standards, okay? So what we would have to demonstrate is that, you know, those people in that watershed in Westport have done what they can. And even if our state water quality standards are not met, it may be because of sources outside of the state and outside of our control. So I can't, you know, I certainly could not guarantee that if everyone in Westport sort of did their part, that it would result in, you know, that water body meeting the state water quality standards. But, you know, it's certainly a step in the right direction, but we, as you said, we don't have authority over the state of Rhode Island. So that is a somewhat unique circumstance to the fact that, you know, you're on the border with another state.
But I'm assuming you've run models.
We know, yeah, we know, I'm sorry, we know what portion of the load is coming based on land use and other parts of the model. We know what portion of the load is coming from Westport and presumably what portion would be coming from out of state.
And do those models predict that you're going to be successful if we go through this process in reaching your goals?
Yeah, that I don't know. And I don't know if Drew's the engineer here, so.
I'm not sure off the top of my head right now, but what I can say is if a TMDL has been issued, that means the goals can be met.
Okay. The second question is a process question. I think you might have already answered it. I believe you're all appointed officials. What level of approval from what elected body is going to be the final say on whether or not this regulation gets changed? Is it the Secretary of State? Or is it the governor? Who is it?
Yes, so what happens next is we take all these comments into consideration. The public comment period closes on 30 January, 5 p.m. So please make sure you get your comments in. We go through a process of sifting through all the comments, cataloging the comments, compiling comments, and then we do our internal briefings all the way to the governor's office.
So the governor is the approving authority?
Yes, we have that built into our public regulation process for promulgation purposes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I do want to add something just a little bit more specific to the watershed permit. This concept started back in 2015, and I've said this before in prior sessions, culminating in a quote test drive of what the concept was based on 3 years worth of conversations with 4 Cape communities, Brewster, Chatham, Harwich, and Orleans, 4 communities that basically share one watershed, the Pleasant Bay watershed. The actual watershed permit was issued by MassDEP on August 3rd, 2018. So it is available to just demystify the concept of the watershed permit. The applicants were the select boards of those 4 towns, and that was supported by an intermunicipal agreement, an IMA, which basically speaks to a lot of particulars as to how these 4 communities are going to work together, whether it's cost sharing, access agreements, and basically ensuring that all these strategies that were the concept that was out there, they basically have a working group to ensure that that works. And again, the theme is achieving water quality and habitat quality restoration goals that, as our engineer Drew stated, are established by the TMDL report for that watershed. So there's another approval process that has to be vetted by the town meetings. And ultimately, the town seniors signed up for the IMA and this permit. So there's a lot of public process involved.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if I could also add the designations for the islands and the South Shore area, we're kind of calling that the second round. That's not the automatic designation on promulgation of the regulation. And with that second round, that's going to be a very public process as well. And so items such as feasibility of meeting goals can be brought up during that process.
And that second round will begin,
5 years, 10 years?
oh, 5 years. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
we're basically focusing on the Cape first. That's going to be an automatic designation. And then somewhere down the line, who knows, 5 years, it would be the communities, as we stand today where we speak, the Buzzards Bay communities, South Shore, et cetera, off the Cape.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Deb Tucker. I live in Dartmouth, and I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight. Close to the mic. Thank you. And so the one thing I wanted to clarify was you said the $1,000 to $2,000 fee that we'd have to pay every year. That would be across the board. That's not like just the people that have to get a pump to pump up. That would be everybody that has this type of system.
So to clarify that, that's an estimation of operation and maintenance costs on alternative technology. The low end being a general use certified system, and the higher end being one that was still in its performance evaluation and provisional use, requiring more frequent monitoring.
My other question is, if you take someone who's about 85 years old, they live in a 3-bedroom house alone. They get their septic pumped every 3 years like the town wanted, have receipts to prove they do this. Their system doesn't fail. It's in excellent condition because they're the only person. They would still have to abide by this, and knowing that they could be dead in 4 years, 5 years, whoever inherits it. Will there be like an exception for people like that they would say, well, yeah, you get the 5 years, you're 85, you're living off Social Security, you probably can't swing it anyway. So then your heirs would have to pay for the upgrade of the system. Is there going to be something like that in effect?
So thank you for that comment, and I encourage you to submit it. Currently as drafted, there isn't a provision, but we would definitely consider and look at that comment. I would consider it would be good to submit that comment to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Doug Jones. I live in Dartmouth. I've been here almost 30 years. I really don't have any questions. I realize this is more of a comment period, and I appreciate that. And I definitely appreciate the presentation that you've made tonight. My first comment would be, I hope that the questions that were asked tonight, and I realize you weren't necessarily prepared to answer all questions, those questions which could not be answered, those answers would be part of the presentation, which is then put upon the website, because I think the people that asked them, those are very specific and key points for them. But what I wanted to speak to was that the regulation proposals that I understand are going forward, or you're proposing, modifications to Title V for the basis of watershed protection and you're doing it as a means of addressing the nitrogen loading as a function of septic discharge. When even the studies on your website show that things like agricultural loading are at times 50% more than the septic loading. And I realize that agricultural loading is not in your purview, but to tell all the residents that they need to make this change when you're not addressing what is a much greater, or when the state is not addressing what is a much greater contributor.
30
is,
seconds.
in the relationship of Pareto analysis, really fall. There are many things that have been brought to the table tonight: age of septic, proximity to flow, annual pumping, which were not considered. Areas not yet designated on the maps that you have shown, will those be included in the future? And the fact that they're not included yet is because no studies have been done on those watersheds yet. I mean, really what we're talking about is the entire watershed. This is a statewide or a region issue. It's not a individual issue. So to approach it by addressing individuals to adjust their septic systems really seems, in the end, an end-around approach to get a town involvement by attacking individuals. And I don't think that's proper. And I think we've also heard a number of comments tonight that said the involvement for individuals along this process was not what it should have been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my only comment there, and I apologize, I want to capture your name. I'm sorry, so that,
My name is Doug Jones.
Doug Jones.
I
Thank
live
you,
in
Mr.
Dartmouth.
Jones, much appreciated. MassDEP, again, as we stated through the course of the summertime, really strive to ensure that we visited every single time, every single town that was affected or to be affected, start that engagement. I can definitely personally tell you as a DEP official that I was really amazed at the volume of information, work, progress across the board. And the majority of the municipalities are truthfully contemplating the benefits of a watershed permit, which would sidestep what we've talked about with regards to focusing on the authority and the line of authority that the Title V provides, which is only nitrogen and it's only septic. I hope that as you have heard MassDEP speak tonight, we recognize that there are other controllable sources of nitrogen. And what we have learned as well is that traditional approaches, such as, for example, wastewater treatment facilities or package plants, also get at other emerging contaminants, like, for example, perfluorinated compounds or phosphorus. So to some degree, we're here to say that it's a complicated conversation, that we are not turning a blind eye on the community. Your concerns are valid. We have a lot of work to do. And the only way that we can achieve the goal is to really factor in all of the comments, written, oral, and tonight's presentation and all this interchange and dialogue has been codified, and it's on a transcript, which will be uploaded for many, many other people to watch and see. So again, you know, we're hoping to continue working successfully with all the cities and towns and learn a little bit more about what's going to be a unique strategy for that community. That's really the goal. Sir, Mr. And I think we're close to the 9 o'clock, but
Yep,
I'd love to
it's
hear
just
from you.
very-
Yes,
So
of course.
after listening to what everyone said here and what the goals are, it sounds like the best option for the homeowners and to get your goals met is let's eliminate the homeowner's septic option and just mandate every town submit a watershed water plan. Just mandate that. This way, the homeowners are not facing the burden unless the town decides it is the best interest of their citizens.
We agree.
One more question, because I think Drew was going to answer a question earlier about what happens if you pump your septic every year, and I think he was cut off, so I'd like to hear his answer on that.
Can I speak to
Yeah, hypothetically, that should reduce, but we haven't, analyzed that enough to have a definite answer. But hypothetically, pumping, should improve, the contribution or decrease the contribution that that system would have on the bay. But what I was going to actually speak to earlier was, one thing that's going on in the Cape, that's being piloted is called a RME, responsible management entity, and that's something that also can be incorporated into watershed permit. And the responsible management entity is an ability that could save money, in that it's treating the systems as a utility where through economic scales of cost, the operators would be monitoring, and so that rather than each individual person contracting their own person to pump and to monitor the systems, it would be more done through a entity. That's not something we're requiring, but that's something that could offer cost savings, and that's being piloted on the Cape right now. And that's where the pumping is folded in.
Yeah, we definitely want to continue that dialogue. So I believe absent, it's 9 o'clock. I wondering what this means for the session. I think we're going to be closing the session at
Yes, we have the
9:02.
room booked at 9 until 9.
Okay. So I just want to thank everyone who took the time out of their busy schedules to come and comment. We really appreciate coming out here. We want to thank UMass Dartmouth and the town of Dartmouth for doing such a great job with labeling the area so we could get here as quick as possible from the parking lot. Please be sure to participate next week. We have 2 public hearings, and then we will be concluding our public engagement process on 30 January 2023. Again, on behalf of MassDEP, the Commissioner's Office, Southeast Region, myself and the team, we thank you so very much for your thoughtful commentary and your engagement. That's really what's going to make a difference here, and we appreciate hearing your stories. Thank you.